very excited to see such a wonderful crowd tonight. Isn't this awesome? This is, my name is Ronchelli, and I organize this thing called Rochester Art Collectors, which it's a thing, but it's really not much of a thing. It's very informal, and the idea is that everything is free. So if you want to join, it's free. And it's hard to get out of it once you join. You almost have to get a restraining order against it. Okay. It really is just for fun. It's avocational. There's no commercial aspect to this. It's done really out of a joy for art. And by the way, one of the things we don't talk about is we don't talk about art as an investment. So that's just not a consideration for this particular group. It's really all about the love of the work and the people who make the work. In fact, we do a series of talks on occasion, not talks, but exchanges between collectors and artists, we call it dialogue art, on topics of mutual interest, but are often provocative. So for example, we did a talk on the price of art. How does an artist experience the price and set a price? How does a collector experience price? Is there a way to talk about that with an artist and so forth? We've done studio tours, we've done researching artists on Instagram and social media. So we talk about things, what are the rules for this stuff? If maybe an artist doesn't want you in the studio, even though you want to be there. So that's important for us. We have a couple programs coming up before we start this one. Let me just briefly mention. We do an occasional walkthrough of private collections. So we ask collectors to open their home up and allow people to come and just walk through and hear about it. The collector talks about the work. They're typically very small groups. So we're going to do one of these later this month. And the location of the tour and the name of the collectors are not revealed until the last minute. It's not really a public thing, it's a very private thing. It's by advance reservation only. And although tonight we don't really enforce a typical program, these are actually, we do check on those. Let me ask you a question. How many people here would have fun if somebody gave you $10,000 to build an art collection? Would that be fun? Raise your hand. That'd be really fun. Well, we're doing that right now. We have a thing called, we have a fantasy art collecting game, and we're giving it a trial run. In fact, we have one of the players here tonight. Yeah, we have some players here tonight. Here's the idea. People get a fantasy $10,000, and they have to go in person to a venue, and they take a picture of the work to buy it. So you go to Rochester Contemporary, you see, I love this piece I want for my collection, you take a picture of it, you have the price in the picture, and you have a budget of up to $10,000, and you have to collect at least 7 works of art. It's called the Red Dot Challenge. Fun, right? On February 1st, we're going to have the reveal, the Red Dot Challenge pilot reveal. So at ROCO, we're going to have the collectors, some of them are going to present their collections. Minimum of 7 works each. We'll probably do 3 or 4 of them. And they'll talk about what were they thinking as they started, what was their theme if they had one in this collection, this fantasy collection, how did they experience it, what was it like. There are 2 complaints that people tell me about with respect to collecting art. One is, I don't have enough money, and the other is, I don't have enough wall space. Yeah. Or I move all the time, or whatever. So this is a way to model the behavior, have a little fun with it. I'm having a blast. I'm doing it also, although I'm not one of the players per se.
You have to encourage them to buy books.
Yes, buy books and art. And tonight we're going to talk about that. Yes, exactly. Yes, that's true. Right. So why don't we get started with this particular program? I go to this show every year. I've gone for years, and I love this show. It's a wonderful show. And it happens to to take place in the fall, and typically I get to it by October or so, and I can't get a program together in the month of December because it's just too much going on. But this year I said, I just have to do something at this program. It's just so good. So I thought, I'll try January. It's closing in a couple of days, right? It's closing in the 6th or 6th, yeah. So we're here kind of at the last minute. But again, it's an international show. It's really huge. The amount of work here is amazing. The quality of the work is just remarkable. So I'm glad you came. Thank you very much. And tonight we're going to talk about book arts and paper art and altered books a little bit. Let me introduce our panelists, and then we'll sort of talk to them a little bit. So Scott McCartney, who's on my left immediately. Scott's an artist and educator who has made arts books since 1980. Visual Books, which is his business, right, is the moniker for small edition and DIY production projects. His work incorporates frequently overlooked details of day-to-day life that reflect our human condition. He uses photography and the computer to realize Mallarmé's aphorism, everything in the world exists in order to end up as a book. While employing his hand and wit to accentuate the book's inherent materiality, Scott was the Best of Show winner in the very first Art of the Book exhibition in 2011. And I think you brought that piece back here a couple of years, didn't you?
I actually just left it here. They were very generous to hold on to it and displayed it for quite a few years until they did the renovation in the center across there, because it was hanging over in the addition across the street.
It's big.
Yeah, it was pretty big. Yeah.
We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Rachel Gutnick is with us as well. Rachel served as one of the 4 judges for the show. In addition to being a judge for the exhibition, Rachel is a working artist and businesswoman. Her art-based business, Just Terrific, and her studio are located near the Memorial Art Gallery in the renovated School 31 Lofts building. Her practice focuses on book repair and restorations, book art, miniature book jewelry. Rachel's work most recently was on public exhibit at Main Street Arts in Clifton Springs. And at the far end of the table, Martha Trimmerhorn. Martha enjoys many different artistic media and forms of expression. Maybe that's why she's so enamored of artist books. The myriad of possibilities in the book form makes a broad canvas for exploring the questions and celebrations that drive her art. Parenthood, family, poets, and other people at the margins, women's history, and so much more. Her practice allows her embrace of the ranges of tragedy and whimsy, and color and texture in equal measure. Martha is one of the artists included in this exhibition, and she's included in 2 categories, which is kind of interesting. So Martha, let me start with you. Tell us just a little bit about your practice, just a brief kind of overview.
Sure. I have my 3x5
Louder, please.
Pardon?
Louder, please.
Oh, I have my 3x5 car, so I can talk a little bit about this. Artist books for me is a perfect vehicle for how I think and work, because it's a container. It's where I can put one thought, one idea, one feeling, emotion, whatever I'm working on into this thing, because life is way too large for me. I get overwhelmed. I get overwhelmed when you're doing a drawing or a painting or something that's 2D. The world is your oyster, it's huge. If you have a container or something with which to have parameters in, it really helps me focus and put that energy into that. And that's, what else was I going to say? The thing that I really wanted to tell you is that for me, making art in general is something that keeps me healthy. I think art keeps us all mentally healthy and alive. And if I didn't do my art, as my good friend Suzanne said, I would only be worse. So maybe just keep doing art.
Rachel, how about your practice? What do you do as an artist?
So I got started as an artist digging through a recycling bin. I care a lot about the environment and sustainability, so naturally I just grabbed some stuff out of a recycling bin and made a book. And ever since then I've kind of been mildly obsessed with repurposing materials. And while I was getting my start making miniature books, I took an apprenticeship with a gentleman who had done leather bindings and Bible repair and book restorations. And so my eyes were kind of enlarged to the book world at the idea of keeping books around that have already been produced and in existence. So that kind of reclaimed my love for sustainability in a sense. And most of my days are spent repairing Bibles and repairing antique old books, mostly from late 19th century, early 20th. And it's a lot of studying of book structures and the way books are sewn. Most books look alike, but are all created differently. So it's a little bit of reverse engineering. And it's care and concern for the legacy of the book, the history of the book, as well as the future of that book for the collection. So.
Scott, how about you?
I've been making, my background is in design and photography, and so I think that sort of informed a little bit of my kind of jumping into the book form. But then I also was introduced to book binding by an artist binder, or I like to call him a real library scientist, Gary Frost. But that kind of like pulled everything together in many ways, because it was, you know, not so much the commercial end of the technologies, but began to bring in other kinds of ideas that were broader in terms of one's own experience rather than someone else's experience. So, yeah, so, I mean, I've just sort of been, that's like what I've done, but...
and you've been engaged almost since the beginning of such things, or at least the current trend in these things.
Yeah.
Back to the 70s. So talk me a little bit about this.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's interesting because there was, you know, back, I mean, there's a lot of kind of gray area in terms of like the beginning of artist books or book arts, but I mean, but it kind of came out of an ooze, I would say, in the 70s, where, you know, like all of this activity, and there were, you know, people making books, people doing mail art, people doing performance and installation, all of this stuff was just like alternative, you know, art. And everybody kind of was doing everything. And then just, you know, as time went by and there were spaces that were organized, that people began getting together and sharing ideas, then, you know, things like the book and performance and, you know, all these other kinds of things began to become realized as fields with kind of their own histories. So, but, I mean, when, you know, when I started, it was pretty much just, you know, like, printed matter, for example, was basically a hole in the wall in Tribeca with like these two tables pushed together with a big pile of books on them. You could come in and just sit down and look at books. So that was kind of the aesthetic, which I kind of, you know, fits my, you know, personality and practice, I would say.
Well, I want to come back to a project you've worked on, I think, more than once, but let's save that for a moment. I want to go back to Rachel for a minute. Rachel, talk about the experience of being one of the judges. Maybe you can explain a little bit who does the judging, how are they chosen, what does it look like, and just talk about process in terms of how the work is chosen.
Sure. So it's a multi-step process. I believe this past year was my 7th year doing it.
Wow.
It's put on by the exhibits team here at the library, and it's an international call for art. So as the years have gone on, it's only gotten larger and larger from more countries, which is just incredible. And what it begins as is images and a written statement. Typically about 3 photos are sent with an artist statement, and that's all I get to see. And so, you know, I've spoken with the exhibits team at great lengths about sharing tips on how artists can photograph their work, because it could be a fantastic book in a poorly lit photo, and I'm not going to give it the time of day that it deserves. So that's a big kind of hurdle for artists to learn and grasp, not just making a beautiful book, but taking a beautiful photograph of the book. Those are judged on a rubric scale, like I think it's a 25-point scale with different criteria. And then from there, the pieces are sent into the library, and what I call Christmas morning. We go into a room which has stories, you know, within its walls itself, and they're spread out on folding tables. 200 books for us to look at and handle. They usually allot us 3 hours, but it usually creeps up to like 4 or 5 hours. We could take a lunch break. This year, I believe, was the first year there was 4 judges, which was an interesting conundrum, being an even number. But being that there's 3 categories, we kind of broke off and were assigned separate categories.
So Rachel, I apologize for interrupting you. Is it literally a mathematical equation? You're scoring these pieces, the 4 of you. Do you then do a calculation that says these are the top 17, or
based on the rubric, yeah. But of course that changes once you see the book in person. So the book could be rated a 23 with a beautifully written artist statement and superb photographs, and then it comes to us and the corners aren't perfect and there's glue or the papers.
So would that be rejected?
No, it's certainly not rejected. but seeing it in person and looking at a criteria of scores like content and color and type, there are different categories that make up those 25 points, but oftentimes when you see it in person, certain categories are stronger than others.
I know there are artists in the room, and the artists here know the answer to this question, but I think for those that are not artists, it's always important to say these kinds of things out loud so non-artists understand what artists have to do. But they, I'm not sure in this instance whether the artists are paying a submission review fee. Do they pay to be considered in the show?
That's a great question. I want to say the answer is yes, because of the time it takes for the exhibits team to do this work.
I think it's minimum for compared to
a lot of others.
And
Yeah.
they pay to have it shipped.
The artist pays to have the piece shipped.
And who pays to get it back?
The artist.
Yeah. So the artist is really making a big financial commitment to apply. They may be rejected. They're not going to get their money back. And if they're allowed in the show, they have to get to work here, and they have to get it back home at some point, right? So I just want to remind the non-artists that this is, this is a deal. This is the thing.
Yeah, and for this show, it's not for sale, right? So these pieces aren't available for those artists to make a commission.
Well, let me ask you a question about that. Suppose I have an interest in one of these.
Yeah.
Could I reach out to the artist? Would anyone put me in touch?
As an artist myself, I would love to hear from you.
Well, pay attention.
Honestly, this program is like a book in itself because it has so much information on each piece, where they're located. So after the opening, I always go home and look all these people up online.
Me too.
Follow them on Instagram or look at their website portfolios, and it's just a great resource to be connected with 100 artists, 100 book artists.
So Martha, you've been in the show more than once?
Yes.
And you're now in 2 categories.
Yes.
So did you apply for those categories, or
Yes.
how did that work?
Yes, in the altered book category and the artist book category.
Would you explain the difference as far as?
An altered book is a piece of art that is taken from a commercially made book or an existing piece of art, and then you do something to it and it becomes another kind of piece of art. So it's typically, the pieces that are hanging on the wall, things are carved out of with the text and everything like that, that's an altered book.
Mm-hmm.
And then an artist book is something that's bound from the hand of the artist.
Right, so it's from scratch.
From scratch.
From materials
Yeah.
other than a book to begin
Absolutely.
with.
Yeah.
And paper sculpture is what you think it would be, right?
And paper
it's
sculpture, yeah.
Made from paper.
Made from paper.
Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely, that would be. Yeah.
And in terms of the work you submitted for this particular show, talk about those 2 pieces.
Those 2 pieces, it was just current stuff that I had, because we try to do, I think they say 3 years or 5 years. They want to see more current work. So it was actually 2 pieces I did over the pandemic. So that was kind of interesting. And one is, the altered book is from a book I actually stole from a student because she was going to make an altered book out of it. I said, oh no, I'm making it. The title is Polygamy in the Mormon Religion.
Yikes.
And it's an enormous book, and it had these amazing illustrations in it. So it's in the piece, and it's called 27 Wives.
Huh.
So,
And this particular show doesn't have an organizing theme, an aesthetic, or some idea that brings it together. Is that right? Or?
Yeah, there's no theme.
Yeah.
I think
The book is the theme.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Right, yeah,
But
yeah.
apart from that top level, so I'm guessing, Scott, you've probably entered a number of these kinds of exhibitions. So talk about that a little bit. Do they come up often? Maybe you don't.
Well, no, I actually don't. I do. I have tried to do this one if I remember or if I'm available. But yeah, I think I don't want to put a blanket on it. But back to that notion of paying a fee, sending it, paying for shipping, not being for sale, having to ship it back, chances of it being damaged, all of this stuff. You really, it's after, when you've been doing it for so many years, it's like, do I really need to kick myself in the shins anymore? So I've kind of pulled back on doing that kind of thing. I have other venues for kind of getting some work out. So.
And Rachel, as an individual artist, you were in the Main Street Art Show. That is a juried show also. So as an artist now, having submitted, talk about You've been on both sides of the coin.
I have, yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
The downsides that Scott referred to are substantial. I have yet to make considerable profits from doing gallery shows or exhibits. For me, it's more about sharing my work. It's an avenue for sharing my pieces with people. I believe that art is art regardless of who sees it, but I believe it has a lot more power once it is shared. So even though it's not a form of income for me, it does bring me a lot of value in that I get to connect with other artists, with the audience, and then share whatever story I'm trying to communicate. So it's time and it's money for the submission and the shipping, but I find it to be a valid trade-off for me. It brings me a lot of satisfaction when I do get that acceptance notice. You know, you try not to look for external validation as an artist, but it does feel nice. And those rejections, I think, do kind of help me build a strong shell. So I do think that that's a valuable skill.
Tell me more about that. Draw that out for me.
You know, it's not for everyone. You can't say yes to everybody's piece, and those rejections, although they don't really give me a clear understanding of why it was rejected, it does give me a little bit of fire under my butt to keep going. As a judge, I'm very sensitive to the idea of different skill sets and different, you know, methods of creating a book. Some people love books that are cleanly made and perfect angles and not a drop of glue, and other people have a style that's a little bit more haphazard and abstract. And so I have to understand that my work may not be tasteful for everybody's preference. And I think that's just a skill. As the more shows you submit to, the better that skill becomes. So it's not a moneymaker, but it does bring me valuable, you know, lessons.
While we were outside walking through the show, I was chatting with one of the folks here who's an artist, and she was talking about how important community is for her in terms of her practice. Is there a book arts, paper sculpture community? Are there particular people that you all hang out with and get valuable feedback from?
Yes.
Tell me about that. Martha, what's your experience with that?
Oh, yes. Oh, there is a book arts community. I mean, we have the book god here. We have Scott McCartney. I mean, really, he's renowned. I don't know if you people know this. He's renowned. He's worldwide renowned. We have Visual Studies Workshop. I mean, we have, which is a premier place that teaches book arts. So there are groups of people that I particularly have.
And we have someone from Visual Studies here also. If I misspeak, then just shout out. There is a library there. And is that library accessible to the public?
Yes.
Yeah. So if somebody wanted to go there to look at a wide variety of all kinds of interesting artist books.
Absolutely. Talk to Tara. She could set up a...
Yeah, by appointment, you can come visit. We have one of the largest independent press archives in the country.
How cool is that?
And it includes an extensive collection of artist books.
Last year, Joan Lyons was recognized at the Memorial Art Gallery too, and that brought a lot of eyeballs to book arts in
show
general.
that one.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Wow, that was amazing. And B. Nettles at the Eastman House as well was fantastic. So Rachel, talk about the community from your point of view.
Of people that I know in Rochester that appreciate book arts, but a lot of it is online. You know, the Book Arts Guild is an international, national, I'm not sure, organization that you can pay into and be a part of. There's conferences that you can go to for book arts. There's, you know, shows that you can go and buy other people's books from.
Is there a book art exchange? Like a print exchange?
I think there is.
I'm not sure.
I think maybe the New York Book Fair.
Yeah, I think they're probably organized more, you know, amongst friends rather than you know, like a real, like a print.
A formal.
Yeah.
You know, which brings up the topic of one of